3M Corporation, Post-it notes, liquid paper, office supplies, that kind of thing. The real official name is Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. Did you know, as late as 1921, the 3M Corporation manufactured one thing, sandpaper. That was it, sandpaper. In 1921, that same year, they hired a young man right out of college, a fellow by the name of Dick Drew, to work in their R&D department, come up with new formulations of better sandpaper. Well, one day Drew came up with a new batch of sandpaper he wanted to try out. He went down to a local paint and body shop. When he walked in the door, he heard violent cursing. The kind that you might be familiar with if you ever heard Richard Cummings talk about the GOP. He went to see what the problem was. And it turns out that in the roaring 20s, every young guy had a car wanted a two-tone paint job. And there were kind of difficult paint jobs. You have to mask off part of the car that you're not painting. And back then they used butcher's paper and a heavy adhesive tape. Now when the paint dried, the workers would peel back the tape, and they oftentimes they'd peel back part of the newly painted surface as well, just ruining their work, and they had to touch it up and redo it completely. And that was the cause of their vexation. Drew realized that what they needed was a less adhesive tape, and he also realized that the company he worked for knew a little something about adhesion, because in making sandpaper you adhere sand to paper. Well, maybe, he reasoned, they could come up with a less aggressive tape. So he went back to his lab and started a long and tedious process of coming up with the right formulation to create the world's first masking tape. And he worked on this for several weeks. And finally his boss, William McKnight, came in and he said, Drew, appreciate what you're doing, but really, your job is sandpaper, so let's forget about this tape business. Get back to work on sandpaper. And Drew did for about 24 hours. And then something occurred to him, he rushed back to his lab and started working again, and worked for a couple of more weeks. Then he came up, then McKnight came back and said, I thought I told you, Drew, get back to work on sandpaper. But Drew couldn't. He kept working on his tape idea. He came up with a formulation that worked, and he went to McKnight and said, I got it, Mr. McKnight. All I need is funding to buy a paper-making machine so that we can go into production on tape. McKnight refused. But see, Drew still didn't give up. He had the authority as a researcher for 3M to write purchase orders in the amount of $100. So what did he do? He wrote a whole flurry of POs for $99. And with that money, he bought the paper-making machine, went to production on tape. We take masking tape for granted today, but back then it was a huge deal. Profits skyrocketed, and the company started making money hand over fist, way more than what the founders or managers of 3M ever thought they would. In short, masking tape put 3M on the map. This is an incredible story, I think, but it's really not about Dick Drew, because we go on and look at Mr. William McKnight. McKnight, he realized that he had told Drew not once, but twice to leave this pet project alone. And were it not for Dick Drew's blatant disregard for orders, 3M would still be a podunk company with a podunk future. He started reasoning. He realized his whole concept of management had to be altered. So he came up with a new theory. He believed that if you had the right person in the right job, and that person was totally dedicated to the project, just leave them alone. Let them do what they're going to do in the way that they're going to do it. In 1948, this is about a year before McKnight became CEO, McKnight wrote down his basic rule of management. He wrote, as our business grows, it becomes increasingly necessary to delegate responsibility and to encourage men and women to exercise their initiative. This requires great tolerance. Mistakes will be made. Management that is destructively critical when mistakes are made kills initiative. And it's imperative that we have many initiative if we are to continue to grow. Let's all take a lesson from Mr. McKnight's experience. Just like McKnight realized, we have people from all backgrounds who look at the world differently, who approach problems differently. We may realize if we give people the honor of having their solving problems their own way, without interfering, without micromanaging, that our wildest dreams